And I will be doing a presentation on poverty in rural areas. Poverty is the state of being extremely poor, and extreme poverty is mainly in rural populations. 80% of people in poverty live in rural areas, and 18% of rural residents live in extreme poverty. Rural areas vary. How serious is poverty in rural areas? Rural areas vary from populations, and resources are different in rural communities. Rural areas are smaller and lack resources and are divided into one community, whereas urban areas are divided into two districts and have access to more resources. I have a picture of poverty in the United States, and it has some of the states that are in extreme poverty, and I will go into more detail about that in my presentation. Rural versus urban populations. Populations in rural areas have lower incomes than those in urban areas. Rural is less stratified compared to urban cities, and range of availability of consumer goods is more narrow in rural areas. Construction costs are more higher in rural communities compared to urban communities. However, rural and urban poverty may have some common characteristics, such as inadequate employment, food, housing, health, and education. Economic disparities between rural and urban communities. Poverty stems from a lack of proper income, and 8.3% of urban populations and 30.0% of rural populations live in low inequality places. 43 out of 50 states are in poverty, and out of those 43, 32 of the states have an income lower for rural households than urban. This is just a little video that I found that goes into more detail about poverty.
In the U.S., there are 740 counties in which 1 out of 5 people live in poverty, which is kind of the untold story sometimes of poverty in America, because it's out of sight and it's in places that are hidden.
What you see when you go through many of the little small towns, they are drying up because whatever industry was there, they probably have pulled up and left. And then, of course, those who move, those are the people that have the education. So who does that leave back home? That leave a group of people who don't have the means or the resources or the expertise that is really needed to build a community.
Rural poverty is so spread out. It's almost like a hidden poverty. You can't see it. It's not in the city. It's not in the news all the time. So we just believe that it's important to really connect those who have a heart with the rural community.
I think we want to live productive lives. I think we want our children to be happy and well-adjusted. We want them to be able to pursue or chase their dreams. I think we want to be able to provide for their needs. I think we want to be able to live comfortably without not knowing where your next meal is going to come from, or whether your lights is going to get cut off or something like that.
I found that video very inspiring, and it also goes into some details about children who are living in poverty, and I'll go into more details about that as well in my presentation. It was just a good video that I thought covered some of the things that are happening. As I mentioned before, these are the states with the highest rural poverty rate. These states are below the median household income, and most of the states living in poverty are in the South. You have Mississippi, Louisiana, New Mexico, Kentucky, and Arkansas are some that I mentioned. And then this is a picture of some that are that I didn't mention as well. These are the top 10 poorest states in the United States. And this was poverty rate of 10.5% and 34 million Americans, and this is from 2019. Majority populations in poverty. According to povertyusa.org, minorities make up the highest poverty rate. African Americans make up 20.8% of individuals in poverty who live in rural areas. 38.1 million people are in poverty, and it has increased with the pandemic. I also have some visuals of the increased poverty rates since the pandemic, and it just has different ethnic groups that are listed as well. As mentioned before, children in rural areas who are experiencing poverty, an estimated 11.1% of the United States household are experiencing food insecurity. And that video kind of touched on some of the things with food insecurity as well. 16.2% of all children are living in poverty, and children who experience poverty are at a majority disadvantages, and many abandon school to get jobs to provide for their families. This is some more statistics of poverty in the United States. I thought they were interesting. Like 12% of children in the United States live in the concentrated poverty areas. I also have a video that I provided that discusses poverty within children who are living in poverty populations as well. Oh my God.
It's rough every day. Where's my next meal gonna come from? What am I gonna do? What am I gonna cook? It's awful. Going without hurts, but you just adapt to it. Try to do my best, what we can. That's me and my husband. We have 3 children at home. Keegan, he's 4. Ayla, she's 9. Cheyenne, she's 2.5. And we get a little bit of help for food stamps, and then WIC, and then the food bank. You know, we need the help.
How do you know your neighbor isn't poor? How do you know your neighbor had a good breakfast this morning? You know that for sure. And is it your responsibility to take care of your neighbor? We started this here it'll be 29 years in March. The first year, we served about 250 people. Last year, we had 2,566 people get food from the food bank. If you drove into town, you probably wouldn't think anybody was hungry. But yet there's so many people in need. It's amazing how much money it takes today. If they have a car payment, they got a house payment, they got, everything paid, and then they get just a little bit over minimum wage and they're driving 30 miles to work. There's just not enough money to go around. I mean, it's just part of life. When you have people come in and they tell you their stories, you can't turn your back on them. No way could you. No way.
My husband works. He's a farmer, truck driver. He's stressed. He tries to do his best for his family, and he always feels like just giving up because he works, but yet money-wise coming in is a lot less than what has to go out every month. A lot less. It's never enough to buy groceries and pay for bills. So we always have to subsidize. Either we pay our bills or, if we pay our bills, we don't eat that good. You want me to go take care of them for you? Sure. Oh, there he goes again. I always try to make sure that supper is our big thing before we go to bed. I try to have whatever we have, a lot of, each, so their tummies are full when they go to bed. Where are you in your tummy for what? Kids eat. It's not like my kids starve. Yes, it might be a little, but they're not exactly starved. I hear you. We try to do our best for our children, but it's not enough.
What roles do social workers play in addressing poverty in rural areas? Social workers work as enablers and brokers. As an enabler, social workers help clients cope with various stresses, and just like in the video that we previously watched, she was saying how stressed her husband was with having to provide for the family and how they didn't have much income, but he was working as a truck driver and a farmer. So as social workers, we have to help the clients cope with these stresses that come with these type of problems when it comes to poverty. And as a broker, we have to make sure that we are getting the clients accurate resources, because in rural communities, their resources are already their resources are scarce. And just like in the video as well, he was talking about how families have to pay their bills, and then they'll have to travel 30 miles to work, and it's putting a lot of stress on them. So as brokers, we have to make sure that we're getting them the accurate resources so that they can excel in their lives and empower them to be better so that they can work. Policies that affect poverty. Rural policy making takes place at the federal, state, and local levels of government. Policymakers must weigh economic, political, social, legal, and ethical factors when making policies. Policies in rural communities are working to improve healthcare coverage, safeguarding rural health facilities, and changing rural health care delivery. Rural communities face a higher uninsured rate and compared to their urban counterparts. Theological frameworks. These theories describe individuals who live in poverty, and one is the family life cycle, which focuses on series of changes that occur in individual and family dynamics. We also have the social construct theory, which is useful for understanding how these individuals cognitively develop their cultural needs and perspectives. Then I also included the systems theories, which recognizes individuals as part of their environment. And with these individuals who are living in poverty, this theory is one of the most important ones, because they stem their daily lives from how their environment is. And if their environment isn't the best, then they grow into adults, or they grow into they lack understanding of how to access resources. And we have to use these theories when working with clients who are living in poverty. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much.